They found the teeth before they found the body. Buried deep behind a junkyard off Flatlands Avenue, a dog had dragged them out like bones from an old secret. 2 molars gold-capped. That was how they knew it was Frankie Knuckles. No ID. No face. Just the metal flashing in the dirt. Less than 12 hours ago, Frankie was at the table with his crew, laughing, eating, trusting. Now, he was a silent warning. Sammy Gravano lit his cigarette with shaking fingers that night. He didn't pull the trigger, but he knew who did. And why. Loyalty had shifted. The boss had made a move. And now the crew was being thinned, fast. That same night, Gravano sat across from John Gotti, eyes hollow, hands still red. Gotti said, "It's either us or them." Gravano nodded. But something broke in him, quietly. Something that would never heal. Frankie wasn't just a soldier. He was a friend. And this was just the beginning. Before the betrayal, they called him the Bull. Sammy, the Bull, Gravano. Not for his brutality, though he had plenty, but for how he charged into danger without hesitation. Born in Brooklyn in 1945, he was dyslexic, misunderstood, a misfit kid drawn to the streets. The gangs gave him what school and family couldn't, respect. And when he found the mob, it was like finding religion. A young Gravano learned the rules fast. Loyalty over blood, silence over truth, strength over mercy. By the time he was 30, he was running crews, collecting debts, settling scores. He earned his stripes the hard way, with fists, bullets, and unwavering obedience. But it wasn't ambition that drove him. It was belonging. The need to matter to someone. The need to be feared. And love. In the streets, emotion was weakness. But deep down, Sammy craved connection. That craving would one day become his greatest sin. Sammy's first hit was sloppy. He wasn't proud of it, but he did what had to be done. A loan shark named Vito had been skimming off collections. Word got out. The boss gave the nod. Sammy followed him out of a nightclub in Queens, into a dark alley. His hands shook. The gun was heavier than he imagined. Vito turned, smiled, recognized him. "Hey kid, what are you doing out here?" That's as far as he got. 3 shots, 2 hits, 1 final gasp. Sammy stood frozen. Blood pooled by his shoes. He wanted to puke, but didn't. Later that night, the boss clapped him on the back. "You did good," he said. Sammy said nothing. But something shifted. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. That night, he didn't just kill a man, he buried the boy inside himself. The mob had its soldier. And the city would never see him the same way again. By the early 80s, Gravano's name was whispered with respect. And fear. He wasn't flashy like Gotti. He didn't crave the spotlight. He operated in silence, made power moves behind closed doors. He became the consiglier's right hand, then the underboss. But the streets always demanded more. Power came at a cost. The more he rose, the more blood he spilled. He missed birthdays, buried friends, buried pieces of himself. He was building an empire one body at a time. But, inside, the cracks were growing. Every kill was another ghost. Every nod from the boss was another nail in his conscience. He told himself it was the life. It had to be. Because if it wasn't, then what had he become? Frankie Knuckles wasn't just another soldier. He and Sammy had shared prison meals, hospital rooms, hits. He was the only one who called Sammy by his childhood nickname, Sal.Call. When the call came down to silence Frankie, Sammy asked no questions. That's how deep the code ran. But after it was done, after they found the teeth and Gotti toasted the cleanup, something fractured. For the first time, Sammy saw the strings. The way Gotti pulled them. The way loyalty was a tool, not a virtue. He poured himself a drink that night, looked in the mirror and whispered, "What the figgy are you doing?" No one heard it. But something inside him did. And it wouldn't stop listening. They said Sammy was born with fists clenched. Even as a boy he fought everything, teachers, bullies, even his own blood. He had dyslexia, but no one knew the word for it back then. They just called him dumb. His father tried to steer him right, tried the church, tried the Marines. But the streets of Bensonhurst had already claimed him. He joined a local street gang called the Rampers. That's where he first tasted power, when his fists gave him a voice. One night, he took a bat to a rival gang member's car and didn't flinch when the guy pulled a knife. The others started calling him the Bull. It wasn't mockery, it was reverence. He wasn't the smartest, but he was the one you called when things got messy. And the older he got, the more the neighborhood started to look like a chessboard. And Sammy? He liked being the piece that knocked others off the board. The Gambino family didn't come looking for Sammy. He walked straight into their world. He started small, running numbers, collecting debts, but he did it with ruthless precision. He didn't just follow orders, he made people believe he was the order. He never smiled during shakedowns, never raised his voice. Just stared. Calm. Honey tea. Cold. That terrified people more than yelling ever could. Soon, a capo named Toto Aurello noticed him, pulled him in, mentored him, taught him how real power worked, not with fists but with fear dressed in suits. Under Toto, Sammy learned how to turn loyalty into leverage, silence into strategy. He wasn't a street kid anymore. He was a made guy in the making, and he could feel the hunger grow. That hunger would soon make him unstoppable. But it would also make him a target. Sammy got made in 1976. It was quiet. No ceremonies, no fireworks. Just a nod behind a closed door and blood on a paper. The oath was simple. Omerta. Silence. Betray that, and you vanish. But that moment changed everything. He wasn't working for the mob anymore. He was the mob. That night he kissed the ring of Paul Castellano, the boss. Paul was rich, refined, ran the Gambino family like a corporation. Sammy didn't like him. Said he was too soft, too distant from the streets. But orders were orders. Castellano trusted Sammy, even made him captain later. But in Sammy's mind, the real king was still John Gotti. Loud, ruthless, electric. Gotti moved like thunder. Castellano moved like fog. And storms always swallowed fog. Sammy didn't know it yet, but one day he'd help make that storm hit. Sammy built his crew like a general builds an army. No dead weight. Just men who could get the job done, clean, fast, loyal. His crew ran construction rackets, controlled unions, skimmed millions off public contracts. They wore hard hats by day and carried silencers by night. He wasn't flashy, but he was effective. When disputes came up, he didn't argue. He handled. You didn't mess with Sammy's business. And if you did, you disappeared. Still, he paid the kids' tuition, sent flowers when mothers died, took care of his neighborhood. To outsiders, he was a paradox. To the street, he was a god. But gods fall too. They just fall harder. And Sammy was climbing high, right into a sky full of knives. He was now John Gotti's golden weapon. When Gotti made his move on Castellano, had him shot outside Sparks Steakhouse in '85, it was Sammy who sealed the vacuum. He backed Gotti, reorganized the crew, and made sure loyalty didn't leak. That hit changed the mob forever. No longer hidden in the shadows, Gotti brought the Mafia into the limelight. Cameras, press, swagger. Sammy? He preferred the dark. But in Gotti's orbit he had power. Real power. He became underboss. Second only to the dapper Don himself. They smiled in public, toasted victory, crushed enemies. But inside, Sammy, something was festering. Gotti liked attention. Sammy liked control. And while they ruled the streets together, Cracks were already forming behind those gleaming suits. With Castellano gone and Gotti crowned king, the Gambino family burned brighter than ever. But heat draws eyes. The feds were circling. Wiretaps, indictments, snitches. Sammy was busy expanding rackets, but the air was different. Everyone was watching their backs. Worse, Gotti couldn't keep his mouth shut. He loved the spotlight, loved talking, especially at the Ravenite social club. He thought the back room was safe. It wasn't. The FBI bugged the place. And Sammy? He heard tapes he wasn't supposed to hear. Gotti blaming him. That thing in Sammy, if he gets pinched, he'll bury us all. The words hit like a blade. Not from some rival. From his boss. The one he helped rise. And suddenly, all the loyalty Sammy gave, it started to rot. That was the moment he realized this wasn't brotherhood. It was survival. And trust was the first thing to die. The more power they gained, the more they turned on each other. Capo whispered behind closed doors. Crews clashed over territory. Money went missing, bodies turned up, and paranoia ruled the air like smog. Gotti started second-guessing everyone. Orders were erratic. He smiled at men during dinner, then signed their death warrants before dessert. Sammy tried to hold it together, tried to keep the machine running. But he saw it unraveling, slowly, violently. His own guys came to him, worried. "We're next," one said. Sammy didn't respond. Because deep down, he knew it too. The family he helped build was bleeding out, and the man at the top had forgotten what loyalty meant. It was becoming clear. You didn't live long in this life. You just delayed your funeral. Then came the indictments. RICO charges. Murder, racketeering, extortion. The feds swept in like wolves in tailored suits. They had tapes, witnesses, surveillance photos. Gotti strutted like it was a joke. "They got nothing," he said. But Sammy wasn't laughing. He read the evidence. He saw his name in black ink, circled, underlined. They were building a case and his freedom was a bargaining chip. Behind bars awaiting trial, the cell felt smaller each night. Gotti called from another wing, told him to relax. But there was no trust left. Sammy knew how the game worked. And he saw his future play out like a silent reel in his mind. Betrayed by the boss he bled for. Buried by a system he once outsmarted. And all the ghosts of the past, Vito, Frankie, Tado, they watched from the shadows. Quiet. Waiting. The trial prep exposed everything. Gotti's tapes were worse than Sammy imagined, laughing at hits, mocking the feds, throwing blame like dice. The courtroom would be a battlefield, but the generals weren't on the same side. Sammy met with his lawyer, eyes sunken, voice low. "They'll throw me under the bus," he said. "I'll rot while he signs autographs." It wasn't paranoia. It was strategy. Gotti needed a fall guy. And Sammy was perfect. The quiet killer. The underboss. Easy to paint as the real monster. The feds knew it too. One day, they offered a deal. Testify. Tell the truth. Walk free. Sammy stared at the floor. Everything he ever believed in, Murta, the code, the blood oath, it all came down to this: die for a man who sold him out, or break the rules and live. Sammy didn't decide overnight. He sat with the guilt, the fear, the ghosts. He thought of his wife, his kids, the crew. He thought of Frankie's teeth in the dirt. And he thought of Gotti, laughing, clean, safe. That was the breaking point. Not fear. Not desperation. Rage. Cold, calculated rage. The kind that lives under your skin for years and finally wakes up. "I'm done dying for people who'd kill me in my sleep," he told the feds. And with that, the underboss of the Gambino family flipped. He crossed the line no one ever crossed. The courtroom would burn. His past would hunt him. And the world would know that even the most feared soldier could bleed. The betrayal was complete. But this time, it was Sammy holding the knife. The courtroom was a theater, and Sammy Gravano was now the star witness. The government's golden boy. He walked in wearing shackles, but carried himself like a man who finally saw the board clearly. The jury didn't know who to fear more, Gotti, who sat smug and defiant in Armani, or the man who once killed for him, now telling every dirty secret in the book. Sammy spoke clearly. No hesitation. Yes, I was underboss. Yes, I ordered hits. Yes, John Gotti approved them. Each answer was a bullet. Gotti tried to smile, tried to charm the jury, but the walls were closing in. For every secret Sammy exposed, another brick fell off Gotti's pedestal, and the world watched in shock. The man who helped build the empire was now burning it down, and he was just getting started. The betrayal sent shockwaves through the underworld. The Gambino family fractured overnight. Some went into hiding. Others swore vengeance. Gotti's allies tried to spin the story. Gravano's lying. He's doing it for a deal. But the tapes didn't lie. The bodies didn't lie. And Gravano, he didn't flinch. He laid it all out. The hits, the money, the cover-ups. Families from other boroughs began purging their own ranks, afraid someone else would flip next. For decades, omerta was sacred. Now, it was paper thin. Sammy wasn't just testifying. He was rewriting the rules. And every name he said out loud, another ghost chained to his legacy. He knew he'd never walk Brooklyn streets again. But he wasn't looking back. He wasn't looking for forgiveness. Only fire. Inside prison, Gotti raged. The dapper Don became the bitter Don. He paced his cell, shouted at lawyers, cursed Gravano's name until his throat gave out. He called Sammy a rat, a dog, a coward. But deep down, he knew the truth. Sammy had beat him. The underboss he underestimated had dismantled everything. And the press? They loved it. Sammy became a symbol of betrayal, of mob decay. But behind the headlines, behind the fury, was a truth no one liked saying out loud. Gotti wasn't betrayed by a weak man. He was undone by the most loyal man he ever had. And that hurt more than any verdict. Because somewhere deep inside, he knew he pushed Sammy too far. And when loyalty dies, monsters are born. Sammy entered witness protection like a ghost slipping into a new skin. New name. New house. New silence. But ghosts don't sleep easy. He tried to blend in. Grocery stores, quiet neighborhoods, fake smiles. But inside, he was still the man who buried friends. Still, the man who once ruled the streets. Every morning, he looked in the mirror and saw both, the executioner and the traitor. The government gave him freedom, but not peace. He saw shadows where there were none, heard voices in static. He wasn't afraid of being killed. He was afraid of dying as a story no one understood. So he wrote his truth. A book. TV interviews. Podcasts. He wanted the world to know why. But the more he spoke, the less anyone saw the boy from Bensonhurst. Only the bull remained. He said he didn't regret flipping. Said Gotti betrayed him first. But regret isn't about logic, it's about weight. And Sammy carried tons. Every friend he turned on. Every family broken. Every name that rolled off his tongue in court. They haunted him in quiet moments, in silence between interviews, in the pause before turning out the light. He once ruled the underworld. Now, he walked grocery aisles alone. No crew. Bow crew. No calls. Just a man with a past too loud to silence. And while he told the world he had peace, there were nights he'd stare at the ceiling, hearing old voices say the one thing they never said while alive. You used to be one of us. But not anymore. The deal was done, but the war had only begun. Gotti was locked away for life. No parole, no empire. Sammy had torched the throne room. But what do you do after you burn the kingdom? Sammy thought witness protection would shield him from the storm. It didn't. Rumors of contracts floated through the underground. Old friends now saw him as a walking betrayal. Hitmen whispered his name like a curse. He moved constantly. New houses, new states. But paranoia was his new religion. Every knock, every shadow, every silence too long, he flinched. The government had saved his body, but his mind was another story. The bull who once walked into gunfights without blinking now jumped at the sound of a car backfire. Revenge hadn't ended with a gunshot. It had become his reflection. He couldn't stay hidden forever. In 1997, Sammy resurfaced with a book deal. A tell-all. Every secret. Every sin. He stood in front of cameras again, not as a mobster, not as a ghost, but as a man demanding his own narrative. I didn't betray my crew, he said. I betrayed betrayal. America watched, fascinated and repulsed. To some he was a hero, proof that the mob could be cracked. To others, he was a traitor with no honor. But Sammy didn't care. This was survival, not redemption. He'd already paid the price. No peace, no family, no name. Now he wanted control. If the streets took everything from him, he'd take something back, his voice. But speaking came with consequences. And ghosts don't stay silent forever. But just when the world thought Sammy was done, he slipped again. This time, not into violence, but business. In Arizona, under a new identity, he started a venture. Clean on paper, profitable. But whispers grew. He was pushing ecstasy. And this time, it wasn't for the mob. It was for himself. The DA was watching. Wiretaps again. Raids again. The irony was sharp. He once destroyed the Mafia. Now he was rebuilding crime from scratch. In 2000, he was arrested with his own son in the indictment. The headlines screamed, "The bull falls again." This wasn't survival. This was self-destruction dressed as freedom. And for the first time in years, Sammy looked lost. Not hunted. Just empty. In prison again, older now, Sammy finally sat with the weight of it all. No visitors. No family. No crew. Just time. He spoke to inmates who didn't know his name. Some didn't believe his stories. "You were a boss?" They'd laugh. He'd smile, tired. Worse, he'd say, "I was loyal." In that quiet strip of all illusion, the truth began to settle. The betrayal didn't happen in court. It happened years before. In alleys. In boardrooms, and in the space between orders and obedience. That's where the ruin began. He didn't hate Gotti anymore. He didn't hate the feds. He just hated how much he let himself believe that loyalty could protect him. He now understood. Revenge doesn't heal. It just fills graves. Sammy was released in 2017. Older. Away. Slower. Still watching over his shoulder. But the world had moved on. The mob was different. The streets didn't speak his name anymore. He tried to stay out of the light, but the stories kept chasing him. Netflix, interviews, documentaries. Everyone wanted a piece. The man who turned. The man who knew everyone. But behind the cameras, he sat in silence. No crew. Why? No crown. Just memories with blood on them. He once walked through war zones. Now he limped through grocery aisles. And yet, somehow, he was still standing. Not because he won. Not because he survived. But because he accepted the truth. In this life, revenge burns everything. And all that's left is the ruin. Truth doesn't come with a medal. It comes with scars. After his release, Sammy Gravano didn't chase redemption. He knew better. But the world kept asking questions, and eventually, he started answering. He launched a YouTube channel. Sat in front of a mic. "I'm not proud," he said. "But I'm not ashamed either." He told stories like war memoirs. Calm, brutal, raw. People watched in millions. Not for the glamour, but for the grief behind his eyes. Every hit, every betrayal, every whispered goodbye. And in telling it all, piece by piece, he carved out something no courtroom or camera ever gave him. Control. Not over the past, but over the truth. And in the underworld of ghosts, that's the closest thing to peace you get. But speaking the truth doesn't erase the past. It summons it. In every comment section, there were names, sons of men he buried, wives of friends he betrayed. You destroyed families, one wrote. You don't get to rewrite history. Sammy read them all. Said nothing. Because they were right. He wasn't chasing forgiveness. He wasn't looking for applause. He was testifying again, this time to the world. Not in a courtroom, but in a digital confession booth. I did what I had to do, he said. And I paid the price. But the thing about truth, it doesn't heal you. It haunts you. It doesn't silence the ghosts. It just invites them in with open arms. And Sammy? He sat in that haunted silence like a man who finally understood what death really feels like, even while breathing. One day, he revisited New York, quietly, in disguise. Not to see friends. There were none left. He walked past the old Ravenite social club. Now it was a shoe store. No plaques. No memory. Just silence. He stood there for a long time, hood up, hands in his pockets. No one recognized him. He wasn't the bull. He wasn't the underboss. He was just a man mourning something that never truly existed. Loyalty. Brotherhood. Legacy. All illusions. He whispered, "It's all gone," then turned and walked away. The streets didn't mourn him. The city didn't stop. Because that's the real truth about this life, it doesn't remember you. It replaces you. And the only thing left behind is the damage. At night, he sometimes dreamt of the old crew. Laughing. Drinking. Planning. Frankie at his side, Todo cracking jokes, Gotti lighting cigars. Then the dream would shift. Guns drawn, faces melting into shadows, bullets flying, blood on his hands. He'd wake up gasping. Every night. Decades of violence replayed like reels in a projector he couldn't shut off. He once told an interviewer, "I don't regret what I did. I regret that I became someone who could do it." That was the line. The wound. Not the betrayals. Not the prison. But what he became to survive. A ghost wearing a man's face. A truth wrapped in blood. And no amount of storytelling could change that. Not even for him. In the end, he wasn't a boss. He wasn't a rat. He wasn't even a survivor. He was a story. One carved into concrete by bullets, betrayal, and silence. The man who broke the code. The man who made the mob bleed itself dry. But truth has a price. And Sammy paid it every day. In the stares of strangers. In the weight of his name. In the moments when he saw his younger self in the mirror. And looked away. "I didn't win," he once said. "I just didn't die." And maybe that was the point. Not all legends wear crowns. Some carry scars so deep they become their own language. And Sammy Gravano? He spoke in wounds. There was no grand finale. No final shootout. No last drink with the crew. Just time. Time that ticked without mercy. Sammy Gravano lived on, quietly, carefully, an aging relic of a war most had forgotten. But in his silence was a lesson. One carved from 1,000 cuts. The mob doesn't have an exit plan. There's no pension for ghosts. No retirement for traitors. Only the hum of an old refrigerator in a rented home, the creak of floors in the middle of the night, and the occasional knock that makes your heart freeze. That's the trade. Not jail. Not death. But never knowing peace again. His silence kept him breathing. But it also kept him buried. Alive, but never free. He sometimes visited his old neighborhood, never during the day. Just parked across the street at night. Maybe you want to wait. watched the lights in windows, heard echoes of a time long gone. The stoop where he had his first fight. The corner where Frankie cracked a joke so hard they laughed till dawn. None of it belonged to him now. The world moved forward. The past stayed buried, but not gone. He kept a list of names. Not to settle scores, but to remember. Because when you've silenced so many voices, you fight to hold on to their echoes. It was the only penance he allowed himself. Not prayers. Not confession. Just the weight of memory, pressed into a man too proud to ask for forgiveness. People still asked him, "Would you do it again?" And Sammy always gave the same answer. "I did what I had to do. For me. For my family." But in his eyes there was a flicker, an almost invisible storm. Truth is, he didn't know anymore. The lines had blurred. Loyalty, betrayal, survival, they'd all become the same color. He didn't regret flipping, but he regretted the life that made him choose. The streets never gave you real choices, only illusions. You were either predator or prey, and he chose to be the former. But predators don't get to sleep easy. They remember everything. Every face. Every scream. Every silence after the gunshot. And those memories? They don't forgive. Sammy didn't die in a blaze of glory. He didn't get the honor or the revenge so many in the life dream about. What he got was time. And time is cruel. It shows you what you lost. Makes you sit in the ruin you built. Makes you watch the world forget your name, even as it cashes in on your story. He gave interviews, wrote books, told his truth. But deep down he knew, the street never leaves you. Not really. It just waits for that quiet moment when you think you're safe, to whisper back, "You're still one of us." And that's the hell of it. You never really leave. You just wear the silence like a shroud, and hope the ghosts don't call your name too loud. There's a line Sammy once said, quiet, off camera, but captured on a mic still rolling. There's no retirement plan for ghosts. That was the truth. The raw, final truth. He didn't walk away clean. He didn't find peace. He didn't get closure. What he got was survival. And in this world, that's the coldest punishment of all. He didn't fear death. He feared being remembered wrong. Feared being remembered as just a rat, instead of a man who made an impossible choice. But in the end, the streets don't tell your story. They bury it. And if it's ever told again, it's through teeth pulled from dirt, through whispers in alleyways, through silence, heavy, unforgiving, eternal.